Hi people, Wadlinger here. Let's talk about figuring out organic molecules, aka hydrocarbons, and figuring out their structure from their name and figuring out their properties from their structure. So the first thing I want you to notice is that if we look at the prefix of a hydrocarbon, so named because they're made of hydrogen and carbon, you'll notice it tells us the number of carbons. Meth meaning 1, eth meaning 2, prop meaning 3, etc. So if you see something like hexane, we know hex means 6. It's 6 carbons filled in appropriately with hydrogen. Remember that carbon can always make 4 bonds. And you might notice here with boiling points that as the molecule gets larger, we get a boiling point that is higher. And this is because as you get a larger surface area for the molecule, London forces will increase. So if we look at these, which one do you think is going to have the highest boiling point? Make a prediction. So methane comes in at negative 161 degrees Celsius, which means it's definitely a gas at room temperature. Ethane 2, propane, negative 42 degrees Celsius for boiling point, and butane at 0. So as we get a larger hydrocarbon chain, we get more London forces, which holds the molecules together better. That's intermolecular forces, and higher boiling points. Now, what about if we make something different? So here you can see we have ethane, eth meaning 2 carbons. If we do ethene, ene tells us there's a double bond. And if we do ethine, ine tells us there's a triple bond. Notice all of these are filled in appropriately with hydrogen, remembering that carbon can make 4 bonds. So which one do you think is going to have the highest boiling point? Make a prediction. So, turns out here that alkane and alkyne are pretty similar. Alkane has more atoms, so more London forces, but alkyne has that nice linear shape, which means they can stack really close together. And if you remember your particle theory, when particles stack closer together, they're more solid. So, see if you can fill in this table. If you look at the first part, we've got the number of carbons and the name prefix, and then we've got the actual diagram of the molecule, alkanes, alkenes, and alkynes. Try to fill it in yourself. Here's what it should look like. Check your answers. So, in addition to just hydrocarbons, we want to look at the structure and then the properties or behaviors of that molecule. Most of the molecule, the carbon and the hydrogen, does nothing. The parts that actually do something we call functional groups. These functional groups carry with them a set of behaviors, things that the molecules will then do because they have this bit of structure. In biology, we're really interested in 6 different functional groups. So here they are. Notice you can see hydroxyl, OH, carboxyl, COOH, amino, like amino acid, NH2, sulfhydryl, SH, phosphate, PO4, and carbonyl, which actually has 2 options depending on whether it's at the end of a molecule or the beginning. For each one of these different functional groups, you're going to want to know what the name of a molecule with that functional group would be like, what the structure would look like, and some of the properties that come with that functional group. Now, an interesting bit here, molecules can move around in 3D space. So if I'm looking at this pen and I flip the pen, it's still the same pen, even though it looks different to you now. So it's really important when we name molecules that we're all naming them the same way so we know if we're talking about the same thing. Because of this, we want to take the interesting part of the molecule, the functional group, and put it the closest to the number 1 carbon. So you'll notice here we've got butanol, so but, 4 carbons, anol, ending with an alcohol, a hydroxyl group, OH. You'll notice the molecule on the left here, we've got those 4 carbons, and the hydroxyl group is on the end carbon. So theoretically, that could be on carbon number 1 or carbon number 4. But everyone in chemistry and biology has agreed it's carbon number 1. Likewise, in the molecule on the right, you can see we have 2-butanol, and it's so named because the hydroxyl group, the OH, is coming off of carbon number 2. If you look at that from the other direction, could it be carbon number 3? Well, it could be, but everyone's agreed the functional group gets the highest priority. Now also here, because most of a molecule is not functional groups, we don't really care about the rest of the molecule often because the functional groups are what provide the functions, the properties, the behavior. So a lot of times when we draw this out, biologists are very lazy. They'll draw out the functional group part and then they'll just write R for rest of molecule. Note that R is not an element on the periodic table, so this should not be confusing. So let's take a look at our 6 functional groups. You're going to want to make a table like this in your notes, and you're going to want to be able to draw and name molecules like this. So our first example here is an alcohol. The functional group is called a hydroxyl. It is OH attached to the rest of the molecule. This is a highly, highly polar group. We know that OH bonds are so polar they're almost ionic, and so this is going to create hydrogen bonding as an intermolecular force, which is going to make these compounds very, very soluble in water. An example here, you can see we have 1-propanol down below, and this is used as a disinfectant. We constantly use it in hand sanitizers. So see if you can name the unnamed molecule. That's right, it's 2-butanol. Butanol because it has 4 carbons, and 2 because the hydroxyl group, the area of interest, is coming off of carbon 2. If you wrote 3-butanol, remember that functional groups should always be on the lowest numbered carbon possible, and remember that these molecules can flip and move in 3-dimensional space. So the way you see it on the page doesn't necessarily mean anything special. So our next one is aldehydes and ketones. These are both carbonyl groups. C double bond O. If it's at the end of a molecule, it'll have a hydrogen attached and then the rest of the molecule. If it's in the middle of a molecule, it'll have the rest of the molecule on either side. So a good way to remember this, ketones, the O is in the middle of that word. Okay? And C bonded to O is also a polar bond, so this is definitely going to increase water solubility. And these molecules are also known to be volatile. That means they release molecules into the air and you can smell them. Great examples of this, the molecule found in cinnamon, the molecule found in vanilla, the ones that make them smell like cinnamon and vanilla. Also acetone, the main ingredient in nail polish remover, which most people will tell you is very smelly. You can see that example down below of 2-propanone, prop because there's 3 carbons, and 2 because the carbonyl group is on carbon 2. See if you can name the next one. It's 2-butanone. Because we have 4 carbons, bute, and the carbonyl group is on carbon 2, which means it is a ketone. It's in the middle of the molecule. Notice we've also got methanol. Al at the end of the word tells us it's an aldehyde, which means the carbon is at the end of the carbon chain. If you only have 1 carbon, by default, you're at the end. See if you can name the next one. It's ethanol. So we've got 2 carbons, F, and it ends in Al because we've got an aldehyde. Here's a joke for you. Formaldehyde, also known as methanol, and casual aldehyde with a Hawaiian shirt. So our next one is carboxylic acid. This is a carbonyl group and a hydroxyl group mushed together. So we call it a carboxyl. Carbonyl, hydroxyl, carboxyl. It's C double bond O, OH. This one has a tendency to lose that hydrogen ion, and things that lose hydrogen ions are acids. So this one frequently ionizes, it loses that hydrogen, it's highly polar, and it's highly reactive. Examples of this that you're familiar with might be acetic acid, also known as ethanoic acid, which is the acid found in vinegar. See if you can name the one down below in the middle. Yep, it's ethanoic acid from vinegar. Ethane from the 2 carbons, and oic acid for carboxylic acid. Amines, we're now involving nitrogen. This is the amino group, NH2. This frequently will pick up a hydrogen to become NH3+. Anything that picks up a hydrogen is a base. So this one is a base, and it often ionizes. This one, the word ends in amine, so they're easy to spot. Histamine, dopamine, caffeine, nicotine, all of these have amine groups. So you can see down below we have one butanamine. See if you can name the other one. It's one ethanamine. Eth for 2 carbons, amine for the amine group on carbon 1. Okay, almost done. We got thiols. Thiols are sulfur groups, sulfhydryl, SH. These are acidic. They're a little bit polar, but not a lot. The important thing here is that 2 sulfhydryl groups can attach together to form what's called a disulfide bridge, 2-sulfur bridge. And these can be a really, really strong bond. They also tend to smell. This is the smell of nice things like grapefruit, but also nasty things like a skunk. Natural gas, like we have in the lab for Bunsen burners, we add a thiol to it so that it will smell so we know if it's leaking. So see if you can name the blank one at the bottom. Yeah, it's 2-propane thiol. Propane because we've got 3 carbons, and 2 because the thiol group, SH, is on carbon 2. Last one, phosphates. Phosphates are a large functional group. They are highly acidic. They tend to lose hydrogens very easily. They lose them so much we don't even tend to draw them with hydrogens, even though hydrogens would be there. And they're very highly acidic for that reason. Big importantness here, they are used in DNA and they're also used in ATP, which is how we store energy chemically in cells. Generally, these are really difficult to draw because it's a big functional group and most people just don't. So you're going to want to be able to recognize these, but I will never really make you draw one. See if you can name the one that's blank. Yeah, it's methane phosphate. We just literally add the word phosphate to the end of the hydrocarbon. If I do ask you to draw them, it'll be like this. The letter P in a circle, and every biochemist everywhere knows that's phosphate. See if you can name these 5 molecules and a property of each one.